Hello everyone, welcome to PHP Machines. In the previous episode, we did quick overview of HTML, CSS, JavaScript and PHP. Starting this episode, we will start building machines using HTML, CSS, JavaScript and PHP. In this episode, we will create a prime tester. This machine will check whether the given number is prime or not. So let me give it a number like 12 and click on check. It says not prime. If I give it 5 and check, it says prime. First of all, we need to understand what is a prime number. A prime number cannot be divided by other numbers. For example, these are prime numbers. 13 is a prime number because it cannot be divided evenly by other numbers. Only 1 and 13 can divide 13, right? So how can we build a machine like prime tester? So what this machine does is, if I give a number like 45 and click on check, it says not prime because 45 is not prime. If I give it 20 and press check, then it says not prime. If I give it 11, then it says prime. So before implementing this machine, let's understand the logic, how we can implement this machine. So to check whether a number is prime or not, we can start dividing the number from 1, right? So we can divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all the way till that number. So we can divide by 1 and we can see if 1 divides or not. In this case, 1 divides 10. We can see if 2 divides 10. Similarly, 3 doesn't divide 10 evenly. Similarly, 4 doesn't divide 10. 5 divides and other number cannot divide 10, right? And 10 divides 10. So after checking all the numbers, we can count the numbers that divides that number, right? So in this case, there are 4 numbers that can divide number 10 evenly. So our count was 4, right? So let's now test a prime number. Let's test 7. So let's divide by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 all the way till 7. So in this case, does 1 divide 7? So 1 divides 7, 2 doesn't divide 7, 3 doesn't divide, 4, 5, 6, and then 7 divides 7, right? So again, we can count the numbers that can divide 7. In this case, there are 2 numbers that divide 7. So this will be the logic of our machine. We will start dividing from 1 till that number and then count the numbers that divide that number, right? If there are only 2 numbers that divide that number, then we can say that that number is prime. Otherwise, we will say that number is not. Okay, now let's start building this machine. I have already logged into Infinity Free. Let's go to File Manager. And if you are using Infinity Free, you need to go to htdocs folder. And let's delete this file. So first of all, let's create a file called index.php. Before starting, I would like to mention one important thing. If you go to Double3 Schools and if you go to PHP, here you can learn about PHP, but you don't need to know everything about PHP, okay? The minimum thing you must know how to use are you need to know about variables. You need to know what type of data can be stored in the variables. After that, you need to know how to use if-else statement, and you should then know how to use at least one loop. Okay, that should be enough. That should be enough to create programs, create machines to solve almost all problems. All other things can be thought of as optional, but to practice any programming language you just need to learn about just these four things. Okay, variables, data types, if else, and loops. Using those you can solve almost any problem. And after you know how to use variable, if else, while loop, and data types, then you can slowly, not now but later, you can slowly start increasing your knowledge by learning about other things. Okay, now let's start building our prime tester. So here I have opened index.php. First of all, let's write our PHP block, and the first code, let's just print hello. Now save it, and let's go to our URL. Okay, it successfully printed hello. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create the form. Okay, so for that we need to create the form using HTML. So to start HTML, we start by doc type declaration. So we write use doc type HTML. After that we need to start HTML block, HTML as head, and then body. Inside it we can give the page title, so we can give the title prime tester, and we can the title. After that inside body, let's put a heading, and let's write prime tester. Now let's save our code and let's check our machine. So right now our machine may not look very nice. We'll first focus on building the functionality. Later, after we have created the machine and after it functions, then at the end we'll use CSS to make it beautiful. So let's first just focus on functionality. So after that we will need a form. So there is a form tag to create forms in HTML. I would like to again suggest w3schools.com. If you want to know, if you click on HTML, and then at the left you can see several categories. So you can learn about form here. So it says HTML forms. So here you can learn about how you can create forms. So inside form, let's create a text box, right? So to create a text box, we use input tag and we give type text. So let's create an input box. So for type we need to give text, and we also need a button. So to create a button, we give type as submit, and we give for the label of the button we can put check. Let's save this code. We should write and save and check, right? So we should build incrementally. So after adding in little more code, you have to test your code so that you don't get stuck on difficult problems, bugs. Okay. So we have created a basic form. Now the next thing we need to do is, if I put in a number and click on check, then we need to be able to submit this form, right? So in order to submit this form, we need to put an action attribute. So in action we need to give the name of the PHP that we are submitting our data to, right? Form to. So let's put prime.php. We'll create this file little later. And in the method for now, let's just put post. Okay. Now next, let's save. So now let's test our message. If I give it a number and then click on check, the form has been submitted and it is giving an not found error, right? So that means it submitted this data to prime.php file, but it couldn't find this file. So we need to create the prime.php file. Let's create this file, prime.php. So when the data is submitted, then the data will be, so when I click on submit, this form will be submitted, the data will be submitted to prime.php. So from prime.php we can extract the data. Okay, for that we need to give the input field a name. So let's give it a name of num. Now from prime.php, let's start our PHP block. So the first thing we can do is we can extract that form value, right? So there is a post global variable in PHP. We can use this $post, and inside here we can give it the name that we gave, right? We gave it the name num to the text field. So this will extract the form text field value, and let's save the value in a variable. So let's call a variable n. I created a variable n, and then I fetched the data and I stored this value to this variable, right? So now let's just print the value in this variable. Okay, we are building incrementally. So if I now give it a value 1 2 3 and click on check, it prints 1 2 3. If I give it a value of like 5 and 5 and click check, it prints 5. So what happened is after we submitted our form, the prime.php fetched the data, it stored in this variable, and then it printed this variable. Okay, now let's start building our machine. Let's so what was the logic we discussed earlier? So now we basically need to do this, right? So in this machine we will be using all the important constructs that we need to learn. So we'll be using variables, we'll be using if, and we'll be using loop. Okay, and we'll be using for loop. So so now let's create this logic, let's implement this logic. So we have our number in this variable, right? So if we pass in 7, then this 7 is now stored in this variable. Now we need to do this, right? We need to start from 1 till 7, and we need to check if that number divides that number or not. Okay, so how can we do that? For that we have a PHP operator. So operators are used for operations calculations. PHP has plus, minus, multiply, divide, these operators, and PHP also has a remainder operator, right? So we'll be using this remainder operator. The purpose of this operator is it divides two numbers and it gives the remainder, right? So if I do x modulus y, then it divides this number by this and then it gives the remainder, right? So if 10 is divided by 6, then the remainder is 4. Now what happens if 10 is divided by 2? Then the remainder is 0, right? So what happens if 10 is divided by 3? Then the remainder is 1. So we can use this operator to calculate the remainder, and the remainder will help us know if the number is divisible or not, right? So for example, if I use 10 and 5, then 10 divides 5 divides 10, right? So in this case remainder is 0. So the remainder is 0 if the number divides. So we can use this logic now. First of all, let's use a loop. Okay, I use I variable. I start with 1 and I loop till that number $n, and I increment this variable by 1, right? Okay, so what this is a loop, PHP loop. And if we see here inside loop, so here is an example of how a loop works. A loop basically repeats, right? So here we can see x starts from 0 and goes till 10, and there is a code inside which just prints, right? And if we run this code, then it loops this many times, right? From 0 to 10, it loops 11 times. So we need to do exactly that. We need to loop from 1 to that number, and we need to find the remainder, right? We need to divide this number by I, as I goes from 1 to that number, right? So let's create a variable called rem for putting the remainder, and let's calculate the remainder. So n modulus dollar I. So what this does is this divides n by $I, and it saves the remainder in this variable. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is we need to check whether the remainder is 0 or not, right? So if the remainder is 0, this is how we use if statement. We have to write if and then we give condition, right? To check whether two values are equal, we use this double equal operator in PHP. So here we are checking if this remainder was 0. So this means if the remainder is 0, then we know that this number is divisible, right? So here we know that this number is divisible. So what do we need to do next then? So if the number divides, then we need to just count, right? Counting is important because we keep on counting, and at the end, if the count was 2, then we know it is prime. If the count was 4 or any other number, then we know it is not prime. So we need to count, right? For counting, let's create another variable called count, and let's initialize it to 0. And if the number divides, then let's just increment this variable. Okay, so to increment this variable, we can just do plus plus. This increments the variable 1. Now let's just echo count. Okay, let's save it. Now let's see what happens. Now let's give it the value of 10. If I give it a value of 10, it says okay, let's see. Okay, here I have a mistake. This should be $I. If sometimes you see a page like this, then you should check back on your code. Okay, you might have a typo or some mistake. Now if I save it and let's run our machine, if we give it a value of 10 and click check, then it says 4, right? So why 4? Because we counted and there were 4 numbers that divided, right? Now let's give 7. Let's give 7 and click check. So in this case it says 2, and correctly, because it is correct because there are 2 numbers that divides, right? So that is what we did here. So it goes from 1 to that number and then it counts if it divides, right? So the last thing we need to now do is, after the loop, we need to just check the count value. We need to check if this is 2 or not. If count is 2, then we know it is prime, and otherwise we know it is not prime. Okay, so let's just print not prime. Okay, now let's check our machine. So let's now test 10. 10 is not prime, so it should say not prime. That is correct. And let's give it 7, and 7 is prime. So looks like our machine is working correctly. If we give it 12, it should say not prime, and if we give 31, then it should say prime. Okay, now looks like our machine functionality is complete. So the next thing we now need to do is we need to make our machine look nice. So for that, let's save and let's now start using CSS to make our page look nice. Okay, so to use CSS, I open index.php. This file has this form. So we put CSS inside style tag. If you search W3 schools colors, you'll find a page where you can so we'll now start applying CSS to our page. So let's first of all let me add color to the background. So to add background color, we have to select the body and then apply a style. So there is a CSS property called background color, and let's just make it black. Okay. So the page has turned black, and for the text, let's just make the text white. Also, let's change the font style. There's a font family property which can be used to change the font style. So let's put something like Tehoma save. So we can see now our background color has changed and our text color has changed, right? So the next thing, let's now center heading. So to center align the heading, we have to select h1 tag heading, and then we have to apply text align and give it a value of center. So this centers the heading. Now let's make the size little larger, so we can do font size like 3em. So this makes it 3 times larger. This makes it little larger. Now let's center these elements. Actually, we can center all elements. So to center all elements, we just put this text align inside body. This will text align. This will center all elements that are inside body. So we have everything in the center. Next, let's apply style to our input field. For that, let's give it ID. Let's call it ENT. And after giving an ID, we can select this ID using this symbol as ent, and then so the first thing, let's make the font size a little larger, so 20 pixel. This will make the font inside this box little larger. Actually, let's make it 40 pixel, and let's also add padding. So padding, what padding does is it adds space inside, right? So what it did, it adds space inside. If I add a padding like 50 pixels, then it adds spacing inside this text box, right? So you can see there is a large padding inside. So let's just put 10 pixels. Okay, now after that, let's also text align center, so that our input is in the center. After, we can see here the box has this outline. We can remove the border and outline of our text box. We can use outline and give it a value of none, and then border and give it a value of none. This should remove that black border outline. After that, now let's style our button. To style our button, we need to give our button an ID. Let's give a ID of btn, and let's select button. First of all, let's increase the font size to 20 pixel, and let's also add a new line here, right? So that way our button will drop down. Now let's change the background color. Background color to white. This will make the button white. After that, let's add padding. I'll use 20 and 10 pixel. This will add 10 pixel top down and 20 pixel left right. So this will add little bit spacing. After that, we can use margin. Margin will add space outside, right? So padding will add space inside and margin will add space outside. We can put margin of 20 pixel. So you can see this adds spacing outside. Finally, let's just add little bit spacing at the top, right? So to add spacing at the top, we can just add padding inside body. So inside body, we can use padding top. We can add padding at the top, and let's put something like 100 pixel. So we can see here our form has shifted a little bit down. So now let's test our machine. If I type 12 and click check, it says not prime. One final thing we can do is if I hover my cursor, then we can change our cursor, right? So for that, inside button, we can use a CSS property called cursor and give it a value of pointer. So what this does is this changes the pointer to hand. If I give it a value of 2, 3, 4 and click check, it gives the answer. Now let's add this style to another page, to the result page. For that, I will just copy this code and then inside prime.php, let me first paste the code here, and we can insert this PHP block anywhere we want. So let me cut it, and here we don't need a form, so let me delete this form and paste the code here, right? Okay. So what this does is whatever printed by the PHP block will be printed outside here, right? So below h1. So now let's test whether our machine works. So if I give 12 and press check, then it says not prime. It is working, but the text size is a little bit smaller. So for that, we can put this value inside a container. So to put a container, we have to use a div tag. We can use div tag. Div tag is used for container. So we put this code inside a container, right? So and let's give id, and let's give the id of result. Now whatever the PHP prints echoes will be printed outside and inside this div, right? So let's now let's increase the font size. Let's make it like 3 times larger. Okay, so check it. If you give 12, it says not prime, and if we give it like 31, it says prime. So our machine is complete. In this episode, we created a simple prime tester machine. In the next episode, we'll create another machine, and we'll slowly build the complexity and start building more interesting and more useful machines. If you like this episode, please click like, share and subscribe. See you in the next episode.